Hello, welcome to Custodes. I'm Charlie and this is another New Year, New Army update. It's been a fortnight and a bit, so it's time to show you what I've been up to in my quest to rescue an entire army from my pile of shame and give it a modest paint job in time for gaming in the UK to become a thing again. Since the last video, I've only really been working on a single model for this project, so this will be pretty quick. I've polished off a shield captain on a Dawn Eagle jet bike, and I know that these are one of the go-to models in a Custodes army, and it'll probably be my HQ at 1000 points, so I had to make sure I did him justice even in this scheme. I spent maybe a week and a half on this mini over evenings with other bits going on in between, but it's a good practice run for the other bikes that I'll have to paint later in the series, and hopefully they'll be pretty quick by comparison. This shield captain's going to be one of the most mobile units in my little army, so I don't want to be losing him during the game. I'm thinking he'll get the superior creation trait for the bonus 5+ wound save, and an Ulrich Aquilus for the 3+ invulnerable save, so that he's got some staying power. I'll probably be fitting him with a salvo launcher to hunt vehicles and to get into melee with some characters, whereas my other bikes might end up with hurricane bolters to help thin out my enemy's rank and file sometimes. They push fit into the minis really well, so I can swap them out depending on my army on the day, provided I don't lose them. Paint-wise, I've carried the solar watch scheme through to both the bike and the rider, but I didn't want the whole thing to be a big block of white, because painting white smoothly is frankly very difficult. I'd already built the model over a year ago, so I started by dousing the whole thing in Skeleton Horde contrast and letting that take care of most of the shadows where I couldn't really get my brush. I had to switch to Mephiston Red instead of Blood Angel contrast for the bike because the surfaces are nice and flat, but that makes contrast paints go horribly patchy if you're not very careful. The end result's definitely close enough and looks a lot better than if I hadn't done it this way, but the contrast has worked out nicely on the trousers and the flappy bits of the robes, which is where contrast works really well, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm still keeping to a tabletop standard because I want to get all these painted and playable at a reasonable pace, so you can see on these close-ups that I've taken some liberties with the detail on the face, which I painted using a mix of Bugman's Glow, Cadian's Flesh Tone, and then Vallejo Light Flesh and basic skin tones. Basically mixing them up on a palette and trying to get a decent contrast going on between the different levels of height in his skin and where I think the light's going to hit them. For the solid panels on the bike, I've made some of the edge highlights on the hard surfaces a little bit fatter so they stand out from a distance, but I've been more sparing on the lightest highlights and stuck only to the very top edges in a lot of places, otherwise I'd be here forever and it would defeat the object of a quick paint scheme to get things on the table. With the big flat areas, for the black I used a mix of maybe 70-30 black and grey towards the top just to give a bit of shadow and depth to it, rather than a flat black surface with crisp edge highlights because I thought they were too big for that to work well. For the red panels I used the same trick with the base coat and the first highlight to put a lighter tone on the centre of the bike nose. It's all pretty standard stuff, but it helps avoid a quick paint scheme looking too flat. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. It's not grey plastic anymore, and the bigger my army of white-clad super soldiers gets, the better the overall effect of the armour and the red detail starts to look. The project's about getting an old army finished off and into the game, so any progress is good progress. Custodes are big models, but they're still pretty finicky to paint with a lot of filigree and little details, and they've got a much more medieval knight feel to them rather than Space Marine sci-fi armour plates. That means when you're painting, it feels like their design has more overlapping sections to them rather than the neat divides on marine armour, so edge highlighting isn't quite as clean cut, and some of the surfaces are pretty big, so you need to think about how they're going to catch the light. But they're fun to paint for an amateur, and are busy enough that I don't think I'm going to suffer too much for keeping my painting techniques simple. By next time, I'll have finished at least one more elite model and hopefully a couple of extras, so I'll have a better idea of what my army composition is going to look like and what I'm going to do with it in the game. I still haven't dipped my toe into the glorious pool that is Forge World, despite the temptations of some of the units like the Venatari jump troops, but I'm sticking to my Games Workshop guns and the purpose of the project, so they're going to have to wait. Anyway, short and sweet as promised, so I'll be back to update the hobby diary in a couple of weeks. Ta-ta!
Thanks very much once again for joining us here at the Custodes. Please like this video and comment, it really helps boost the channel. You can also subscribe to the channel via the icon below, or why not check out one of our other videos or playlists. You can click on either one's on screen right now.